Tensions surge as nuclear posturing escalates between Washington and Moscow, with Trump ordering submarine repositioning after Medvedev's dead-hand warning, while hypersonic missiles deploy in Belarus, raising global alarms. Is this saber-rattling a strategic bluff, or is this a prelude to a conflict between the two countries? Meanwhile, a growing bloc of progressive Democrats, led by Representative Rouhana, is urging the U.S. to recognize a Palestinian state, and joining allies like France and the U.K., who plan to do so at the UN this September. The push comes amid outrage over Gaza's famine and Israel's deadly restrictions on aid, signaling a potential shift in U.S. policy. I'm Henny Saif. Let's get in focus. The Independent has reported that in a recent development concerning the Russia-Ukraine war, the Kremlin has issued a stern warning about the dangers of nuclear rhetoric. This comes after President Donald Trump ordered the repositioning of U.S. nuclear submarines, a move that followed a heated exchange with former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. While Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov downplayed the significance of the submarine movement as a routine procedure, the warning itself is a notable signal. The Russian position highlights the inherent risks in such discourse, especially between nuclear-armed nations. Ultimately, Moscow appears to be attempting to de-escalate the situation verbally and avoid further escalation. The Kremlin's call for caution underscores the potential for miscalculation and the grave consequences that could arise from such provocative rhetoric. Before continuing our discussion and topic tonight, let us move to the spokesperson of the Secretary General and the General Assembly briefing, and we'll be back.
Between Syrian Democratic Forces and Syrian government forces in northern Syria, and I wonder if Secretary General has any message for parties.
Yeah, what I can tell you is that the Secretary General is concerned over reports of clashes in Sueda Governorate in southern Syria. There also were some reports of fighting in the north of Syria. The Secretary General urges all parties to immediately stop the violence and restore calm. All parties are reminded of their obligations to protect civilians. He stresses the importance of ensuring safe access to essential services. It is imperative to support a credible, orderly, and inclusive political transition in Syria, in line with the key principles of Resolution 2254. Okay, have a good afternoon, everyone.
That was the spokesperson of the Secretary General of the UN and the General Assembly briefing. He was speaking about the conflict and the violence that's been taking place across southern Syria, and he called on the Syrian factions and divisions to halt the fighting, reach a ceasefire for the coming and near future. Back to our topic in today's In Focus. We are joined to help us reach more clarity regarding the most recent updates concerning the threatening rhetoric between Trump and Putin and its implications on the Russia-Ukraine war's fate. We're joined from Washington by Mr. Jim Townsend, the former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Mr. Townsend, welcome to In Focus, sir. Is the U.S. submarine repositioning a calibrated deterrent or a dangerous overreaction to Medvedev's nuclear taunts?
Well, I think in terms of the submarine itself, it was very vague about what kind of submarines he was talking about, and talking about deploying them to close regions. That's something that modern day submarines don't have to be in a certain region because of the range of the missiles that they carry, if that's the kind of submarine he's talking about. But you know, I think we've moved beyond that. Certainly, as you have pointed out in your reporting, both Moscow has been distancing themselves from what Medvedev had to say, and they've been saying very nice things about the potential visit of Steve Witkoff on Friday to talk about the Ukraine war and any kind of peace agreement. So I think this period is behind us, and they're looking forward to this visit by that U.S. By the U.S. party to talk about peace in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Well, Moscow did distance itself, but does Trump's ultimatum to Moscow risk reducing diplomacy to a public spectacle with nuclear stakes?
Well, I think the public spectacle with nuclear states has been around since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, because Putin talked about that. Medvedev has talked about it in a much more visceral way, and he's talked about nuclear war and this kind of thing. I think with Putin, he's always been vague about it, but he's hinted at that the potential of a non-strategic nuclear weapon being used in Ukraine when things were tough, particularly in that first year of his 2022 invasion. So the rhetoric has started there. This is the first time Trump has talked in that way. Certainly in this second term, it's the first time he's talked about it that way, and I think he hasn't said anything since. And it would be good if both Moscow and Washington didn't talk in these ways. This is just a rhetorical flourish by both sides. I don't see actual deployments of nuclear weapons having taken place, whether it's with Russia or the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe Moscow downplayed Medvedev's statements, but is the Kremlin's deployment of nuclear-capable bombers near Europe a signal of escalation? How credible is deterrence when hypersonic Oshnik missiles now stand guard in Belarus within striking range of NATO?
Well, I think in terms of nuclear deterrence, so far, thank goodness, nuclear deterrence has held. Neither side has used them since the beginning of the Cold War. And continuing to this day, both sides, up until this recent exchange between Medvedev and President Trump, both sides have refrained from talking about those things. As I said, Putin talked about it on a battlefield nuclear basis earlier, and so I'm hoping that what we're seeing, whether it's aircraft being deployed, as you just pointed out, or hypersonic missiles, that this is something that is not signaling anything right now. I think this is something where the fighting hasn't reached a stage where there makes any sense for some type of nuclear signaling to go on at all. This has been a rhetorical thing recently. It hasn't been anything that would have prompted that. So really, I think it's a matter of talking about peace in Ukraine and not talk about use of nuclear weapons, whether it's battlefields, non-strategic or strategic or rhetorical back and forth. I think both sides need to cool it and focus on something else.
Well, speaking of cooling it, do you think Steve Witkoff's diplomacy could succeed where sanctions and submarines have failed to bend Putin's will?
Well, I think certainly there's a better possibility for that by having someone like Witkoff go in and talk to Putin than by talking about nuclear weapons. That's just ridiculous to even have that discussion. But with Witkoff, there is, I think everyone welcomes an opening where we can sit and talk. And from what the Russian spokesman had to say. It sounds like Moscow is really welcoming Witkoff to come. They're looking forward to the discussions. They like him. There's certainly a lot to talk about. Getting talks restarted is critical, and I think there is much more to be gained by that visit by Witkoff, and certainly more welcoming voices in Moscow than what's happened over the past couple of days.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's another theory that maybe we're not witnessing an escalation, but a choreographed display of strength designed for domestic consumption rather than war. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that's closer to an explanation than actually getting prepared for a war or seeing a warlike threat from the other side that would call for a nuclear response. That's ridiculous. There's nothing going on between Russia and the United States that would warrant a movement of nuclear forces or threats of that nature. So if this is something for domestic reasons, that makes more sense. I don't know about Trump if that was. I can't think of a domestic audience right now that was looking for a response such as Trump gave about submarines. But I think he hasn't said anything since. And so I'm hoping that instead we're going to talk about Witkoff and what we need to do with Russia on Friday. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, maybe it was domestic. I think for Medvedev, I think for sure that's domestic. I mean, he's a politician. He says this kind of thing a lot. So he must be getting some type of reward in terms of domestic politics for saying those kinds of things. But I don't think Trump has gotten any bounce from talking in those terms, and he hasn't said anything since.
Mm-hmm. Well, words can also have a very strong effect. Now, imagining a darker scenario, could miscalculation in the Baltic or Black Sea turn a war of words into an irreversible nuclear flashpoint?
Well, in terms of nuclear policy, nuclear strategy, this type of thing, the accidental launch or the miscalculation that leads to nuclear tensions, that's always been a worry since the earliest days of the Cold War. And both Russia and the United States, and when Russia was the Soviet Union, we worked very closely to make sure that we kept very clear intentions. We try not to surprise one another in terms of the nuclear side. We didn't want any miscalculation from movements one way or another. And both sides, particularly during the Cold War, both sides had a choreography, if you will, to make sure that there was not a misunderstanding or miscalculation. I think in today's post-Cold War world, particularly with conflict in the middle of Europe now, that's even more important. The United States is not a combatant in this. The use of nuclear weapons for the United States is just not foreseen in something like this. This is the U.S. nuclear capability is for deterrence. It's not for use in some type of crisis in the Black Sea or in the Baltic. So really, I think as we get into the years to come, whether it's in conflict or not in Europe, both sides have to get back to this choreography, to making sure that when we talk about nuclear weapons, that we are very transparent, very clear. We make sure there's no misunderstanding and there's no miscalculation. And China needs to be able to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the world where dead hand shadows loom, is it really affecting the US-Russia relationship, or is it also affecting the rest of Europe? How should Europe react to all this repositioning and the war of words between Russia and the US, especially the NATO members?
Well, that's a good question. I think I'm hoping that Europe saw this for what it was, which was a rhetorical flourish between Medvedev and Trump. That this was something that wasn't the prelude to any kind of war between the U.S. and Russia, particularly a nuclear one. But I think what it does is it reemphasizes the importance of not having this kind of rhetorical exchange, making sure that we have a choreography that inspires stability and it inspires a confidence in Europe or anywhere else that that kind of accidental launch into disaster would not happen because both sides are stressing that. But I don't think there's been moves over the past number of years by Russia or the United States, any kind of nuclear move made that should upset anyone right now, and certainly into thinking that there's a nuclear war on the horizon. A lot of what Putin said about Belarus and hypersonic missiles and stuff, that was rhetorical too. I think last I heard that no one has seen any kind of movement take place. But it's not. I think there's a time to be really worried, and there's a time not to be, and not to panic. And this is one of those times. I think what we should pay attention to is what the spokesman said coming from Moscow about the visit of Witkoff, the continuing work between Washington and Moscow to try to improve relations, to try to deal with Ukraine and try to find peace there. I don't think anyone wants to have a miscalculation that leads to a tragedy. So if I were European, I think I would pay more attention to what's happening on Friday and less to people like Medvedev, who says these kinds of things. And also with Trump, I think sometimes he also has rhetorical flourishes. He hasn't said anything similar. His people haven't said anything. So I think we're moving on to what's important, which is what's going to happen on Friday.
Mr. Jim Townsend, the former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, thank you very much, sir, for your insights. From the nuclear brink in Europe to the moral imperative in the Middle East, rising global tensions are forcing a reckoning on both security and sovereignty. More than a dozen House Democrats have signed a letter pressing the Trump administration to recognize a Palestinian state, with at least one lawmaker preparing to introduce a pro-statehood resolution. According to Axios' website, the surge in efforts to secure Palestinian statehood stems from growing unease over Gaza's worsening humanitarian crisis. Even some Republicans and staunchly pro-Israel House Democrats have ramped up their criticism of Israeli leadership in recent weeks as famine conditions take hold in Gaza. The letter, excerpts of which were obtained by Axios, states this tragic moment has underscored the urgent need to recognize Palestinian self-determination. The lawmakers also reference French President Emmanuel Macron's pledge to recognize a Palestinian state at the upcoming UN General Assembly, a move sharply condemned by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. However, Axios noted that the U.S. is unlikely to follow suit, given the Trump administration's staunch alliance with Israel and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In delving more into this file, we're joined from Washington by Ms. Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and political analyst. Ms. Chapman, welcome to In Focus. How significant is this growing support among progressive Democrats for recognizing a Palestinian state? Could this pressure the Trump administration to shift its policy?
Yes. Well, first, thank you for having me today, Haney, and greetings to your viewers. And yes, this letter from the Democrats to President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio is a major shift in American politics. This is significant, not just because we've got the Democrats signing on, we also now have independents signing on. Another thing that is significant is that the New York Democrats, who are the most pro-Jewish Democrats in America, are now signing on to this letter. This is significant because many of these New York Democrats are self-proclaimed Zionists, and even they are saying that it is time for a change. What is happening in Israel is turning the world against Israel. We've gone beyond being isolated to a situation where now the world will want revenge upon us for our actions. This is also significant because in tandem, the Democrats introduced a bill to block rifle sales to the Israeli police. This looks like it has a chance of passing. And they have also introduced another bill to block the sale of heavy weapons to the Israeli military. So this letter is a signal that there are more bills coming. And what is really important is the Senate actually has a lot of leverage over the president, and that's because the Senate can hold up the bills and the legislation, the nominations of candidates for office that are the most important to Trump. So this is setting up a battle between our legislature and the White House. What's also significant is that more Republicans are coming around to this point of view that we have to stop weapons sales and that we have to stop doing everything that Israel wants us to. For the Republicans, this is becoming an examination of the relationship between Israel and the United States. So this is more than just recognizing the Palestinian state. This is examining the relationship and the power that the Israeli government has over the United States government. And also, this is setting up a battle between Donald Trump's cabinet, within his cabinet, in addition to the Republicans in Congress, and in addition to the generational battle and the battle going on in American churches and on the streets of America. But with Trump's cabinet, we see Trump making statements such as, we need to stop the starvation in Gaza, there are starving children, we need to do something. At the same time, his ambassador to Israel, Huckabee, is repeating the Palestinian line and saying the food distribution is going fine, there is no starvation. So we see on one hand some of Trump's cabinet, Ambassador Huckabee, repeating the Israeli talking points. At the same time, Trump is speaking out about Gaza, which he has not done before, to the alarm of many American people. And so Trump is speaking out about Gaza. He's in battle with his cabinet members. And the other thing we expect to see now is we expect to see Netanyahu start to make more pleas directly to the American people. He's going to show images of the captives, the Israeli IDF soldiers who are now the only remaining captives. So we're going to expect Netanyahu to go on a media push, a public relations campaign about the captives, the hostages, in order to sway American sentiment back to his side.
Yes.
This is unlikely to succeed.
Well, you've mentioned that some of these House Democrats are actually self-proclaimed Zionists. Now, why are traditionally pro-Israel Democrats now pushing for Palestinian statehood recognition? Could this signal a lasting shift in party positioning, or are they just wanting to win over the public opinion, calm down the protests, stand on a higher moral ground?
Well, this is more than just responding to shifts in public opinion, the anger of the people. As far as seeking higher moral ground, it's apparent that America is not on the moral high ground here. And it is because of this that we are seeing the New York Democrats, the self-proclaimed Zionists. They can no longer make excuses for Israel. They can no longer blame Hamas, say this is all Hamas's fault, because of the images that are coming out of Palestine, and because we are seeing a backlash in America. We're seeing blowback. For example, the New York Jewish Democrats are very alarmed at the candidate Zohar Mamdani winning the primary for New York mayor. They still have to have the mayor's race, but Mamdani is a self-proclaimed socialist. He's an Arab, and many of the secular Jews in New York are not Zionists, and they are they too want a Palestinian state. So there's also an internal battle brewing within the Jewish Democrats, who are an extremely strong and powerful voting bloc in America. So this is more than just responding to trying to improve a public image. This is responding to a dramatic and permanent sea change in America after many decades of being subject to Israeli propaganda and the Israeli point of view in our media, in our politics, directing our military actions, driving us into endless wars in the Middle East.
Well, Ms. Chapman, what impact then could the symbolic recognition of by notable G7 nations such as Canada, France, and the UK have on U.S. foreign policy, especially if more allies join?
Yes. Well, the recent push by France, joined by UK, Germany, now Portugal, we saw nations last year, Spain, Norway. So it is becoming apparent to the American people and our politicians that the entire world is changing. The entire world is witnessing what has happened. Out of 193 United Nations member states, 143 are now solidly behind the two-state solution, behind the right of self-determination and statehood for the Palestinian people. And in addition to the writing on the wall, seeing nation after nation stand behind Palestine, stand against the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, not to mention the unbridled military aggression in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, which is bringing the world to the brink of World War III. There is an acknowledgement that facts on the ground has changed. This is not the year 2000. This is not the Clinton administration. Bush, Obama, Trump won. Events are now larger than the ability of Israel and the United States to stand in the way.
Yes,
and
well,
one other point I should mention is this, and I've said Israel could tear apart the Republican Party, because now we see Trump attacking Republicans who have stood behind him, such as Thomas Massie, Rand Paul, who supported Trump while he was being impeached. Now Trump and the Israeli lobby are starting PACs, political action committees, to attack Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie has, I would say, he may have more America First support than Trump does. And for the Israeli lobby to start attacking representatives such as Thomas Massie, if they go after Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republicans will rally behind Massie and the America First Republicans more than they will rally behind Trump, because of his perceived support and the pressure. He is being perceived as a puppet of Israel. Many Americans are worried he is being blackmailed, not because he's in the Epstein files, but because the Epstein files contain evidence of a Mossad operation.
Well,
so we feel that Trump
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to cut you off, Ms. Chapman. Talking about the recognition of Palestine as a state, how might the U.S.'s opposition to Palestinian statehood recognition then strain its relationship with key allies who are willing to recognize Palestinian statehood, such as France, Canada, Ireland, Portugal, the UK?
Well, Haney, everything is coming to a head right now. We're only 7 months into Trump's second term, but as you see, the situation with Ukraine and Russia is going nuclear on social media platforms. We see the situation with China and Taiwan. Taiwan is worried about an invasion, a blockade. So the crises around the world are coming to a head right now. Donald Trump has no choice but to face them head on. He will no longer be able to hide behind Netanyahu's skirts or say he is doing what our most valued ally wants us to do. So we are seeing permanent and dramatic changes in America, in our policies, in our politics right now. Things are coming to a head. And Trump will have to make a decision. He will have to face the changing, dramatic events happening globally right now.
Yes, well, hopefully it is the right decision that will be made. Ms. Ginger Chapman, the lawyer and political analyst, thank you very much for joining us and for your insights. From nuclear brinkmanship to moral crossroads, the world watches as power, principle and peril collide from Eastern Europe to the Middle East. The stakes have never been higher. And by this we come to the end of this episode of In Focus. I'm Henny Seif. Thank you for watching.